In the previous lesson, we saw how we can work with effects in After Effects by applying them onto the various layers. And we saw that we can now also have some simulation of 3D, and we can work with the text, we can work with the videos, we can work with audio. So many different types of effects. And in this video, we're going to continue to talk about 3D in After Effects. So I'm just going to create a new project. I'm going to create a new composition. Again, it's going to be the standard size. And let's say, okay. So let's get started and let's create some layers. Now, if we go in the layers, there's basically where everything begins usually. So we start with the text, or we can start with a solid and so on. Now, there are some layers that are strictly related to 3D scenes and the 3D environment, which are the light, the camera, and the well, if we want, we can also import an entire Cinema 4D file or Cinema 4D scene inside After Effects. But these are the most important, like the camera. Now, anything else can be transformed into 3D. So if I create, for example, a simple solid layer made of pixels, and let's just call it white solid. Now, this is a 2D layer. To go in the 3D space, to go in the 3D world, all we need to do is go down here and check these little check marks in the timeline. And this represents the activation of the 3D transformation onto this object. So we can see now that we can move the solid layer around, as we already done previously with the X and the epsilon. But we do also have the Z, which is the depth. So if I click like this, I'm going to like move this plane forward to the camera, and like this, I'm going to move it backward. Now, it's not so easy to work in 3D this way. So usually what we can do to work better is change the view. So if you go down here now, you can see that we have the possibility to switch to the draft 3D view. And here we can change the render engine. So let's start with the classic 3D, which is the default. And then we can also change the camera. So we can go in the default camera, or we can go in the front. We can go on the side, on the top. And we cannot see pretty much anything from here at the moment. Or we can also like leave the default camera and also use more views. So I can use 2 views, I can use 4 views. Now in these 4 views, which probably are the best for working in 3D, I can see the top of the scene, I can see the right, I can see the front, and then the camera, the active camera, which is right now the default camera we're using. Now to see better this 3D view or camera, we can go up here in the toolbar. We can see now we have 3 extra tools, and these are for navigating the 3D world. One is orbit, so I can click and drag, and I can orbit around. So I can definitely see now this is a 3D plane, and I can see the 3 axes, epsilon, x, and z. Now, if I select it again, I can see that I can move it on the y, on the x, and also on the z. And I can also rotate it in various different ways. Now, also what we can do is clicking on the little squares is to scale it in one dimension or the other, or also move it around. And by the way, you also find down here the same transformation tools that we saw previously, but this time with the addition of the Z, which is this one here. So the third dimension here in the position will be the Z. So we have X, epsilon, Z. Now, if for any reason anything goes slow, check your video card, or you can always check the draft 3D. When you apply the draft 3D, it's going to be easier and not slow to work in the 3D environment. When you turn off this is going to be like the heavier visualization. Also here we have X rotation, epsilon rotation, and Z rotation. So we are now able to work with another axis, which is the Z. Now let me just go all the way back and restart from kind of the beginning in a way. So I want to go here, just gonna redo the new solid and make it 3D. Okay, now it automatically switched into the 4 views because this is the saved 3D configuration, and we are now using Cinema 4D as a render, but we can also use advanced or just stay with the classic right now. Then we're going to move forward later. Now, if I create a new text layer, and let's just type After Effects. Now, just as any other layer, this will be in 2D until I check this checkbox. Now, in this case, we have 3D layers, but they're not actually 3D, they're flat. So you can see here from the top that these are flat lines. They don't have like 3 dimensions. To make this 3-dimensional, I need to not only use this because this will let me access to the 3D transformation, but what if I want to have thickness in this text? Well, in that case, I need to go here and we will expand here the various parts, but you can see that the ones that we need, that is geometry options, is deactivated. Why? Because in this case, we need to change the render. So if I click here, it's going to bring me in the composition settings, and it's going to ask me which render engine I want to use. So here I can choose a different render, and you can see if I choose Advanced 3D, I have the possibility to use 3D models and materials, environments, lights and shadows, physically based render of 3D layers, and I can extrude and bevel the 3D text and the shapes, which means vector graphics, not raster graphics. And I can do also material override. And this is what I cannot do anymore. So effects, blending modes, layer style, and so on. Or also, you cannot use like the mask and preserve the underlying transparency for 3D models and all these other effects. So if we go in the most advanced, which is the Cinema 4D, again, we have the possibility to use lights and shadows, extruded and beveled 3D text, and so on. Now, we can also change the options, and we can use higher settings or higher quality, and this will take more time, or we can make it more draft, just like we changed the resolution in the composition. So let's leave this like low right now. And of course, if I change the type of render, also here I have like render quality and other settings that I can adjust. So let's stay with the advanced right now, and let's say okay. And so you can see now we have the advanced render also right here. And now if I go in the After Effects track text here, I can see that we have now geometry options. And I can expand this and add a bevel. So it could be like standard angular level. And then I can add a bevel depth. And especially what I can do is apply an extrusion. So I'm going to increase this, and you can see now from the side, you can see the bevel there and the extrusion. Also here from the top. Now we don't see it right here because probably we cannot, well, let's just orbit around here. So I'm going to click this and orbit. There you go. So you can see the text is actually behind, or almost totally behind the plane. So what I want to do is select that text and bring it forward using the Z. So now you can see that this line represents the panel, the solid panel on the back, and this is the text that we just extruded. Now I can also make a less thick extrusion, and those are the bevels. So I can like make them smaller, or I can make them bigger, and I can make them concave. So they have a curve like this, and you can also zoom in here to see the changing. Or we can make it convex. So they're like round, nice and rounded. There you go. Now, a quick way to navigate in the 3D scene without going all the time up here. So here we have orbit, 3 different types of orbit around the camera, around the scene, around the cursor. And then we have the pan. So we have pan like this, and we can move the camera basically around. And then we have the zoom or dolly.